Production of Kansas City Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
This week we take you from the airport to big national news at one of the Metro's largest assembly plants, to a memorial in Johnson County, to 20 years of sporting KC. We head to Topeka, where Chris Kobach is in the spotlight, and to Jefferson City, where there are rising tensions over a religious freedom amendment. A lot more stories in between we'll be tracking this half hour as we connect the dots on your local news. Hello, I'm Nick Haynes. Dissecting those headlines, star political columnist and the host of Up to Date on KCUR-FM, Steve Kraske. From the Pitch newspaper, reporter Steve Vokrot. From KCTV5 News and KMBZ, Neil Jones. And Kansas City Star reporter, columnist and blogger Dave Helling. August or November, is that really the only decision Kansas City leaders have left to decide when it comes to the future of KCI Airport? The drumbeat for putting a more than $1 billion terminal plan before voters continued this week, with planners insisting that the new design will be almost as convenient as the existing airport layout. They've even counted the steps. Right now, they tell council members the shortest walking distance from curb to gate is 119 steps. The longest, 411. They contend walking distances in the new terminal concept would be from 234 to 544 steps. Was that considered by council members to be an acceptable difference, or several steps too far, Steve Vokrot?
Well, I think for some, the explanation was probably suitable. I suspect for others that it was not. I've spoken to some council members who they want to get more information before they really commit themselves one way or the other. But you see what the city is really trying to do is it's almost like the early campaign effort. They want to reassure Kansas Cityans that yes, we can build a new airport that won't look like, the monstrosities of Atlanta that frustrate so many travelers. We can retain a lot of the conveniences that exist today and upgrade the things that don't really exist. Primarily restrooms, which do exist, but tend to get filled up pretty quick, and the lack of amenities beyond security checkpoints.
Is there nothing at this point stopping this from really just getting on the ballot at this point for a new terminal, Steve?
Well, sure there is. The Airport Advisory Committee the mayor set up still has to meet and sign off on this. The City Council, of course, Nick, has to weigh in on this. Something this big, something this monumental, very controversial, so council members will want to take some time here. It seems to me, speaking of time, that time is an ally for those who want a new single terminal airport up there. This thing, there was a rush attempt to get this thing through a few years ago. Too fast, too quick, didn't work, too big of a change for so many Kansas Cityans to hang on to. As time has gone along here and you have news stories coming out talking about, hey, it won't be that much longer of a walk under a new single terminal plan, that campaign that begins to build momentum a little bit here for a single terminal concept. No predictions here, but I think time's been an ally for those who want change.
Now, a rival design that could be built for a third of the cost by remodeling the existing terminals got a new airing this week at a forum at the Plaza Library. Local-based Crawford Architects is behind that plan. But why is this coming up again? Weren't we told, Dave Helling, that this idea had to be dismissed because it didn't have the amenities? It wasn't the same. It was apples and oranges, a comparison between what the city was planning.
Right. I think there will be alternatives proposed and offered as we near an election, which, by the way, may be in August or November, depending on the calculation as to whether you want a low turnout election or a very high turnout election in November. But the actual design rests largely in the hands of the airlines. Because those are the companies that will use the facility, pay for a lot of it, and so they'll have a very outsized voice in whatever the city comes up with. And it won't, you won't get competing plans on the ballot. You'll either vote for this or against this, whether it goes on in August or November. One other quick note, there are whispers, Nick, in Kansas City, that there's a way to do this without going to a vote of the people. And I think, cooler heads are saying don't even try it, but it's being discussed.
How would that actually happen?
Well, there is apparently some loopholes involved in the bonding authority that they could use to issue the borrowing notes to pay for the construction without a prior approval by the voters. There are some questions about whether or not you need 57% to issue these bonds, a simple majority in terms of timing. There are a lot of unanswered questions still on the table.
Neil.
$1 billion plan to fix an airport that most travelers, 64%, say works. $1 billion, at least the Crawford plan is talking $350 million for one terminal. Okay, that is a lot more palatable to an outsider, just someone who travels. I'm not an expert, I haven't studied the issue, but this is the most convenient airport in the United States to my mind. I've been to all the modern, new, beautiful, huge airports. I don't go to airports to shop, drink, or eat. I go to my gate and get on a plane and go. And we are not a hub. So people don't come here and stay 4 hours and then fly out like they do in Chicago and Dallas and Atlanta and New York. We're a destination or the start of a trip. It's ridiculous to me to spend $1 billion or even talk about it when you have so many other things you could spend it on, as in a $1 billion tax cut for the people of the city.
Given that there's that much concern, and Neil is echoing a major sentiment that many people share,
sure,
that the idea that the city would perhaps look at passing a plan like this without going to the voters?
Well,
Steve?
and that would, as Dave suggests, that would be a very controversial move. Having said that, though, keep in mind here that taxpayers aren't on the hook for this new airport. Airline fees, travel fees, those kinds of things.
Parking fees.
You know, parking fees pay this tab here, okay? The other argument on the flip side of the coin, not endorsing either way, this current airport is 50 years old. The world has changed. 9/11 has happened. The mayor of this city is saying we've got to keep up with the times and get with it.
More Missouri-based companies, large and small, putting the pressure on Missouri lawmakers to abandon efforts to pass a religious freedom amendment this week.
You don't have to take my word for it. You can just look at what is playing out in the rest of the country. There is nothing good, nothing positive that's coming from this type of language or legislation throughout the country.
This is an anti-discrimination bill. This is to prevent government penalties against those who exercise their rights to live out their sincerely held religious beliefs.
Now, this measure has already passed the Senate. Is there evidence that pressure from business and sports organizations is influencing votes this week in the Missouri House? Neil?
Well, you say that, pressure. It's reality. I mean, we don't live in a fantasy world. These are going to be the ramifications if this bill's passed. Whether it's right or wrong is really immaterial. If they pass this measure, the NCAA will pull the NCAA tournament games from next March. They will not bring more NCAA tournament games here to Kansas City, probably pull the Division II soccer tournament from Swope Park, which is small potatoes. But the bigger question is, what will the Big 12 do? I spoke with an athletics director from the Big 12 earlier this week who said, look, I can't guarantee that we'll pull this because we haven't crossed this bridge like the NCAA has. But I would say this, our member institutions are watching this very closely, and we are hearing from them about this. If the Big 12 leaves, it's not really about the cash cost. It's what it says about our city. We spent $212 million building the Sprint Center, more than that, redeveloping the Power and Light Center across the street. We have turned an eyesore, a ghost town of a downtown, into a vibrant, exciting area. It's affected the quality of life, which makes it easier to bring businesses to our community, not just Kansas City, not just Missouri side, the entire region. It's helped us. It's changed the relationship that we have with the rest of the country. People see us as a community that's exciting and vibrant. You do not want to send the message that, you know, we're taking a step back. Missouri, their slogan is, we're open for business. I'm not going to argue the merits of the bill because there's questions that go well beyond sports, but simply in sports terms, there are major ramifications if this bill passes, and I think that the leadership needs to accept the fact, whether it's right or wrong, this is what's going to happen.
But on the counter side of that, aren't there many people who have sincerely held religious beliefs, as this bill would propose, who actually go to a lot of these games, who go to these Big 12 tournaments, who will say, I'm not going to buy tickets anymore. Aren't these sports organizations also worried that they're going to lose people because of this?
I don't think so. I think that sports transcends the state line. It transcends Republicans or Democrats. The Royals and Chiefs are probably the only two entities that bring everybody in the Kansas City area together. Kansans, Missourians, Republicans, Democrats. Democrats, pro-choice, anti-choice. It brings everybody together. Everybody has their flag. I mean, nothing brings us together like sports. I'm not saying this is the end of the world if we lose the Big 12 or if we lose the NCAA, but look at Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City's arena and their NBA team came about not because of sports, but because Oklahoma City could not attract major businesses, specifically an airline, and the mayor knew they'd put together the best deal to get United to come in, and yet United chose another city. He waited about 4 weeks. He went up and had a one-on-one private meeting with the CEO who told him, we are not coming to a community that doesn't have a good quality of life. You don't have a good downtown. You're a bunch of little municipalities and not really a city. That's why they built the Ford Center. That's why they did Bricktown, and that's how they ended up with an NBA franchise. It wasn't about sports. It was about quality of life and bringing in business.
Supporters of this measure in the Missouri legislature saying that big business and these sports organizations blackmailing lawmakers over this effort. Is there any evidence, though, that this influence of corporations and the NCAA is having an influence on those votes in the Missouri House?
I think without question you're seeing the GOP faction here that's been pushing this legislation, Nick, sort of divide over SJR 39. The Missouri Chamber of Commerce, no less, coming out very much against this proposal. They're traditionally a conservative Republican organization backing lawmakers there. Just to keep in mind a basic fact here, if this thing winds up passing the Missouri House, Nick, Governor Jay Nixon cannot veto it. It's a constitutional amendment. It would go immediately to the voters. Governor Nixon's only point of decision here is to decide whether it goes on the August ballot or the November ballot. Very interesting thing. The timing of that ballot will be very interesting, what he would decide if in fact it passes, but we're a long way from that happening yet.
Okay, Dave.
The decision of whether or not to put it on the August or November ballot gives away a little bit of what's happening here, which is the Republicans are interested in using this measure to drive up turnout in November. It's much more, as we've discussed on the show, about politics than actual policy, because while it's very symbolic, it doesn't impact that many people one way or the other. But it does have an enormous emotional appeal. And so my guess is if it did pass the House, the governor would put it on in August, let the Republicans yell about it as they lead up to their own primary, and keep it away from the November election.
Let's look what happened in Indiana. Indiana passed this by a vote of 40-10. It had overwhelming support in the state legislature there, and the governor signed it into law. 7 days later, he had to come back and neuter it, because they ignited a firestorm they didn't expect. They walked into a situation where suddenly the NCAA saying, you know what, we're pulling every Final Four we've got at your dome. The NFL said we're moving the NFL Combine. Wow. A bunch of organizations stepped up and said we're not going to allow our conventions to be held there. They didn't expect that, and so they came back 1 week later with a way to neuter it and allow communities to opt out, like Indianapolis and the bigger communities, and that's what they've done. They didn't know what to expect. I spoke to a reporter up there who covered it and said, you know, nobody could have predicted that. Well, you know what? The Missouri legislature doesn't have that. They can't say that. They have a barometer for what will happen if they do this. And if they make this decision, I don't live in Missouri, and I certainly don't question people's motives, but they need to understand the actual ramifications of their decisions.
When you have big companies like Burns & McDonnell here locally, and there's 200 companies, according to the Greater Kansas City Chamber, who have come out against this proposal, what are those companies going to do? They're not going to leave Missouri and move over to Kansas, are they?
Well, I can't speak for the companies themselves. They may switch their political support from some of the people who are pushing this bill. So there's several local companies and statewide companies who've contributed money to Bob Onder, for instance, who is carrying the water for this legislation on the Senate side. They may put their money elsewhere, maybe against some opponents of him. But you know, businesses understand if we're talking about ramifications, it's also about being able to attract employees. And, you know, if you go recruiting employees from other parts of the country and they look at a place like Missouri and say, you guys knew what the ramifications of this bill are and you still went for it anyway, me as an individual, I don't want to go to a place like that. That's part of what's playing out here.
Can I just say, though, briefly, because I think Steve is right, but if you want a better illustration of the disconnect between sort of the grassroots normal voter and the leadership, quote unquote, of the state, the business leadership, sports, whatever, this would be a good issue to address, because does anyone doubt that if this goes on the ballot, it would pass in Missouri? Yes, it would. It would pass, just like every other amendment like this has passed in recent years. And so when you say things like, well, businesses are opposing it and it would cause boycotts, that illustrates the disconnect between those institutions and grassroots voters who see nothing wrong with embedding this kind of language in the state's constitution.
Nearly a month after voters cast their ballots, the results from Missouri's presidential primary are finally known, and Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton can add the state to their list of wins, though by the slimmest of margins. Hillary Clinton beating out Bernie Sanders by 1/5 of 1%, the same margin that Donald Trump wins over Ted Cruz on the Republican side. How important is that win to Donald Trump this week, Steve Kreski?
Oh, it was important. It comes on the heels of his very much publicized loss in Wisconsin, Nick, and he needed some good news. He got it here. It looks like he's going to get some more good news next week as he goes into New York for the Republican primary there. He's ahead in the polls, as is Hillary Clinton. On the Democratic side, she has lost a series of caucus states to Bernie Sanders, 7 or 8 in a row. This allows her to say, hey, I just picked up a win. It mattered.
Donald Trump has spent the last week complaining about the Republican process, and they're trying to jerk him around and not give him the nomination. But the rules help Donald Trump, too, and here's how. In Missouri, he won by 0.2%, but he'll get 37 convention delegates. Ted Cruz gets 15. That's more than a 2-to-1 margin for a victory of 0.2%. The Democrats have the exact same margin, 0.2%. Clinton gets 36 delegates. Bernie Sanders gets 35, much more reflective of the actual vote. So the rules work for you and against you, Donald. Understand that going forward and quit whining.
All righty. After protest clashes with police at a Trump rally in Kansas City and a rally canceled in Chicago over concerns about violence, the Kansas City Star editorial board recently claimed Kansas City might have just dodged a bullet when it lost its bid to host the Republican National Convention. It heads to Cleveland in July. But those words have led to an angry response from Cleveland officials who are now taking to bashing Kansas City. One of Cleveland's top TV news anchors joined in this week. Watch this.
Truth and facts are the calling cards of news. I don't like another city badmouthing my town, calling Cleveland something it is not. When I read the editorial written by KansasCity.com, I was appalled. The editorial hints at possible riots in Cleveland, with hundreds of arrests and injuries tarnishing this city's image. The convention isn't even here yet, but a city which could not win it is writing irresponsibly about Cleveland, which did win it. The editorialists are playing pretty loose with their writings. Something else, don't call Cleveland the mistake on the lake, as you did. We won a national convention, a political party convention. Mistakes don't win that. Kansas City, you wanted it but didn't get it. Is that what your editorial is really all about?
Said Leon.
That's
well
when you
said.
say,
Yep. Bunch of sore losers.
I love
huh?
that.
You know what?
Take that, Kansas
If
City.
you aren't first, you're last, KC.
All righty, and the response to the Kansas City Star to that is what, Steve
There hasn't
Kreski?
been much response yet, but they are being such homers in that Cleveland editorial there, just sort of standing up for the hometown team. Hey, listen, I was down there covering Donald Trump a few weeks ago in Kansas City. I think that editorial was spot on. I think there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff going on in Cleveland this summer. I'm not sure Kansas City is going to look back and wish it had won this convention.
Neil?
Great television, terrible journalism. And if the situation was flipped, I would hope that Channel 5 would put someone like Dave Helling on saying the exact same thing.
To our non-Kansas City Star reporter, Steve Vockrodt.
Well, my recollection was that the Star editorial board was somewhat bullish about trying to get the RNC back when it was still in the running.
But we didn't know Donald Trump was probably going to be the nominee at that point either.
Yeah, but I guess what I would say is, do people really attack, if riots happen in Cleveland, do people then look at Cleveland and think, what a rotten town? I don't really think so. I think there's kind of a separation between the two. I think the event will probably go well in either place, and even if it doesn't, I don't think that's a reflection of the city itself.
It depends on how the police handle it. The Chicago police got such a horrible because on television they could see people getting hit with billy clubs and stuff like that. It depends on how it's handled. But Brad Stevens went down and covered the rally when Trump was
From
here.
KCTV5,
and he agreed with Steve. He talked to a lot of the people who were on the Trump beat who cover him every one of his events, and the media people said, we believe there's going to be something big that happens.
It's not the damage to the city's reputation that I'd be concerned about. It's the damage to physical infrastructure and buildings if riots break out. That's what you have to be worried about here.
But in some parts of downtown, they could cause about $1 million worth of improvements. Okay, Kansas City making national news this week. The Wall Street Journal reporting that General Motors plans to build a new small luxury Cadillac vehicle here at GM's Fairfax assembly plant instead of a plant in Michigan. A GM spokesman confirming that the automaker has scrapped a $245 million investment at its Detroit facility in order to shift production of the new Cadillac model to the KCK plant. Now, we may not view ourselves as an automotive capital, but Kansas City is quietly becoming one of the nation's largest auto manufacturing hubs. Not long ago, Automobile magazine named Kansas City's Ford Claycomo plant the busiest plant in America, rolling off more cars than anywhere else in the nation. And in the past 2 years, 11 suppliers to Ford and GM have set up shop in the metro. These suppliers, according to industry analysts, creating nearly 1,800 new jobs. So why don't we hear more about this claim to fame? We tout entrepreneurship, life sciences, and animal health. Why don't we say, welcome to KC, America's automotive hub, Steve Volkart?
Well, I think it's, even despite what you said, it's pretty tough for Kansas City to carve out that space when Detroit is still pretty strong in this area. You know, the entrepreneurialism thing is, in life sciences, an attempt by the city to really kind of stake its claim into something that maybe it can make a plausible argument in favor of, but Michigan and more specifically Detroit is still the big automotive center.
Steve.
You know, I think Steve's hitting the nail on the head here. Detroit is so well known as the auto hub of the country. Having said that, let's give credit where credit is due here. Governor Jay Nixon back in 2010 and a bipartisan group of lawmakers here in Missouri pushed this plan to induce Ford to stay here in our neck of the woods with a $100 million tax incentive program to keep Ford here and keep those lines rolling. Boy, has that thing paid off, not only in terms of the jobs up north here, but also in terms of the suppliers around Missouri who supplied that plant with all kinds of things they need to do their good work. Governor Jay Nixon was just in Detroit a few months ago for the annual auto show. He has reason to sort of raise his hand here because this will become a major part of his legacy going forward.
Let's give credit where credit is due. GM investing in Kansas at the Fairfax plant where Governor Sam Brownback, I'm assuming it's because of conditions in Kansas that they're investing there.
I think one of the reasons that the automobile companies like Kansas City is because the workforce is fairly well trained, fairly productive. You know, getting in, getting out of Kansas City is fairly easy in terms of transporting their goods around the country. You don't hear a lot about it, Nick, because manufacturing in the United States continues to shrink. We're much more of a service economy than a manufacturing economy, even from 20, 25 years ago. Steve points out that the incentives from the states have helped build these plants. It's a double-edged sword because it's hard to argue that Ford deserves subsidies from taxpayers while other businesses don't through tax increment financing and other mechanisms. They can make the claim that I'll add jobs, you know, whether it's Cerner or whatever. So they're part of this whole sort of what some people call crony capitalism. Having said that, you'd rather have, I think, the Claycomo plant and the Fairfax plant.
I did notice Governor Sam Brownback this week calling for a moratorium on these tax incentives to businesses that cross one side of the state line to the other. What was not clear to me, though, Steve Volkart, after all this time, why now?
It's not clear to me why now either, although I suspect well, I would like to address just the moratorium just for a moment. It is a moratorium in some respects. It calls for a moratorium on some of the more often used incentive programs, being Missouri Works and in the Kansas Promoting Employment Across Kansas. And those have been used pretty frequently to get companies to move, in some instances, just a few blocks. But it doesn't address all the other types of incentives that both states can still use to accomplish the same thing, STAR bonds being one of those.
2 years ago this week, 3 people were gunned down by a white supremacist outside the Jewish Community Center in Overland Park in the nearby Village Shalom retirement facility. The gunman has already been sentenced to death for his crimes. This week, family and friends of the victims dedicate a memorial on the Jewish Community Center grounds. A plaque featuring the images of the victims were laid out there. Above them, a new artwork symbolizing ripples of water spreading love and kindness. Thousands will gather Monday evening to take part in a 3-mile walk in honor of the victims from the Jewish Community Center to the Church of the Resurrection. 2 years on, have the tragedy itself had ripple effects in this community still, or for the most part have we moved on, Steve?
You know, I think it's both. You know, I think we are moving on. Life does moves that direction. But, you know, it's such a beautiful thing that happened out there this week, people remembering what happened and the heinous acts that Frazier Glenn Cross committed out there. As you point out, he's been sentenced to the death penalty in Kansas. We haven't had one of those in
since the mid-90s. Mid-60s was the last time someone was executed.
With the in cold blood guys,
right,
you know.
Right.
So justice is moving forward. So I see it as a little bit of both, Nick.
Well, yes, it seems like almost everyone cares only about the Kansas City Royals these days. Well, there are other teams in town. Kansas City's professional soccer club marking its 20th birthday this week. Sporting KC, which started as the Wizards, launched 20 years ago this week. They began playing back then at Arrowhead Stadium before moving to the T-Bone Stadium in KCK as they built their new Diggs, just renamed Children's Mercy Park. Has the newfound success of the Royals come at a price for Sporting KC? Are fewer people now going to their games now that there's another winning team to support, Neil?
Well, I don't think you can judge a team by its, especially an MLS team, by its attendance. Their attendance is going to be good. They've averaged the last 4 years, they've averaged a sellout, which they have a 19,000-seat stadium. I think that they'll continue to fill it. Where I think it's affected them is simply in buying merchandise. When they unveiled their new uniforms, everybody, whether you like soccer or not, had to get them because they were so different looking and they were so neat. Just as a barometer, we send Christmas gifts out to all our families and friends, and we have friends overseas, my wife and I. And so we were sending Sporting KC stuff because it was so unique and it looked so good. What did we send the last 2 years? World Series stuff from the Royals. That's what we sent out to all our family all over the United States.
So do you think it is hurting them, Steve?
I don't think it's hurting them. I was at the game this week, and it was still pretty full, very boisterous crowd. They're still selling out. But if you look at the way the community responded to the Royals when they won the championship compared to when Sporting Kansas City won it in 2013, just very different. And that speaks more to the nature of soccer standing in the United States.
And that is our Week in Review. Some stories we didn't get to, we'll get to them next week. I'm Nick Haynes from all of us at KCPT. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.